Jane, it's in everyone's interests, whether it's single women, their children, taxpayers, employers, or the government more generally, to ensure that welfare policy supports and encourages people to spend only the time truly necessary out of the workforce unless they're in a position to fund it for themselves. What are the perverse effects that arise from having childcare and welfare policy that's operating at cross purposes?
Well, you and I know a fair bit about this, Amanda, having both worked in women's portfolios in the last government, and I know that you felt the same as did I, to be very proud of being part of a government that saw the gender pay gap come down from a high of around 17.5% when the coalition came to power in 2013, right down to as low as below 13%. And in fact, I think it went down to around 12% at one stage as well. And not only that, but we saw women's participation in the workforce rise to record levels. That's something that I was very proud of, and I know that you were too. And getting the incentives to encourage more women to participate more fully in the workforce is part of the challenge. That was certainly our focus when we did changes to the childcare subsidy to make sure that those that had second and subsequent children that were working, that were studying, that were volunteering, they were the ones to where the subsidy was directed. My concern now with the childcare subsidy that's being proposed by this government, an additional $4.7 billion, so not a small amount, is that in fact, A, it will get gobbled up by inflation almost immediately. We can see childcare costs already going through the roof, just 6% in just the last 6 months alone. And B, it doesn't do anything to address the other problems with things like childcare, like accessibility, those childcare deserts in certain regional towns, and of course the shortage of the workforce too. So will this subsidy, this very, very large subsidy, have the effect that Labor are promising? I very much doubt it. In fact, when Labor were last in power, we saw childcare early learning costs go up around 53% in just 6 years. So you can see how these things get out of control very easily. The most important thing that we can do, of course, is to bring inflation back down so that the costs of running those childcare centres, whether it be energy, whether it be food costs, come down as well. And that will make childcare more affordable and sustainable.
I mean, you've pointed out the way that the subsidies, as they are increased, get gobbled up almost immediately by inflation in the cost of childcare. But aren't the economic effects of subsidies, ongoing and higher costs almost immediately applied, part of the problem? Don't we need to reimagine the way that we do this so that it doesn't continue to be out of the reach of normal families?
Well, I think that there's an awful lot of evidence to suggest that that may be the case, because childcare and indeed aged care are those industries where the cost pressures are so great and yet the demand for care is simply increasing. So at some point there does have to be some fresh eyes and a new approach to the way that we fund childcare and aged care as well. But in the meantime, simply throwing money as subsidies to the system won't necessarily solve the crisis, and in fact it could make it worse. You look at something like aged care, for instance, and a noble cause, including a nurse 24/7 in every aged care centre, but unfortunately because of that imposition on the sector, we're now seeing aged care centres shut down because they're not going to be able to meet their legislated requirements. So you can see the perverse effect potentially of simply legislating an outcome or throwing money through a subsidy to a sector.
Yeah, good point. Senator Hume, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.